First on our agenda is a presentation from DFA, someone we all know and some of us love. I don't know if everybody loves her, but the Dfa Director Liz Welch. Welcome to the chamber.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I brought the smart people with me that can give the committee the details, and our two main requests are the state health insurance plan and Bureau of Buildings. Y'all all know Glenn Cornbreck, who's over the Bureau, and Cindy Bradshaw, who's over the insurance, state health employees insurance. Glenn has had the help of a mechanical engineer to help us come up with the priorities with the ARPA money for buildings, state buildings and improvements. Cindy is also going through the expenses of the healthcare plan. We found about 50 million so far that the plan is out that ARPA could definitely pay for. We are still continuing to look at the plan and see what is eligible for that expense. We are asking for a total of 200 million for the plan. The surpluses have kind of been spent down over the years. We'd like to beef up that surplus and then do incremental increases each year as they're needed. We might not need one, but if we did smaller increases, it would not be as large a hit to the general fund if we kind of had a even ask. So that's what we're kind of looking for. I'm going to let Glenn talk about the buildings. We've talked to IHL, Community Junior College, state agencies, and looked at our own buildings to see what our priorities would be. And so I'm going to turn that over to him, and then I'll let Cindy just say a few words about state health insurance plan. Thank you, Senator Polk. Okay, Glenn.
Good morning. Thank you. I appreciate any time I can get up and speak for the buildings of the state of Mississippi. I believe they distributed. You should all have a handout. Talked a little bit about the approach we took to make recommendations. We focused first on items that are not potentially otherwise funded by other sources. So we did not look at things that were also eligible for CARES or ESSER or HERF funds. We confined our recommendations to specifically identified eligibility categories. We started with the end in mind. We looked at what are the reporting requirements for this program, and there are several very specific categories that we vetted each project that's on this list by to make sure it complies with the guidance and the reporting requirements. We included projects for ventilation, which will address the mitigation of airborne pathogens, which will entail the replacement of aging HVAC equipment. This is actually beneficial in multiple ways in addition to dealing with a transmission source for COVID and a prevention. It also will address our aging mechanical and HVAC infrastructure, which is currently beyond most of its remaining life, and as well as the existing equipment we have is energy hogs. So once we replace our ventilation system, not only will we have better air, but we'll have it for a much cheaper cost per ton, operational cost. We included also projects for touch-free fixtures in our restrooms, again, another source of transmission. We included projects for infrastructure to address both DEQ non-compliance as well as to replace aging systems beyond their useful life. We included projects for water filtration. We have certain areas of the state, specifically the Jackson area, where the quality of our water needs some help. Building-wide filtration systems are part of the recommendations. Another projects type that are eligible are water conservation projects. We consume a lot of water, and all that water has to come from somewhere and be paid for. So the water conservation projects will reduce that ongoing cost. We also did not look at broadband specifically. That's out of our wheelhouse. We deal with buildings. We don't really deal with the broadband, so we did not make specific recommendations in that area. We did talk to many of the institutions and the community colleges and spent a good bit of time on our larger agencies that have a lot of deficiencies in terms of their HVAC systems. Mental health has a lot of aging systems and a population that in an incident of a COVID outbreak, they can't go home. They have to stay there. That's where they live. Our corrections facilities, which are quite often under federal oversight and review, numerous sanitary and water infrastructure issues at Parchman and our other correctional facilities. Our wildlife fisheries and parks have miles and miles of infrastructure, as I believe they've expressed before. In addition, they have many items which affect tourism. If they can't rent out their motels because they have air conditioning systems that do not properly isolate and filter air, that's a problem, as well as their group camp functions. They host many group camp events from out of state, which again, safer ventilation systems and touch-free lavatory systems will help. DFA is listed for a large amount. That's our capital complex, including this building. Again, to improve the ventilation, to improve the filtration, to the national guidelines as far as what we should be doing to filter and circulate this air and bringing in more outside air. We also include recommendations from several other smaller agencies. We did look at a prioritization, assuming that you weren't just going to write us a check for $500 million. And prioritization, of course, number one would be ventilation systems. It's the most directly related to the spread of COVID and the mitigation thereof, followed closely by infrastructure at both our state agencies and universities. Water conservation projects would be great if they're able, because a long-term investment, it will pay for itself eventually, but clean air and functional infrastructure is our top priority. Some additional considerations, regardless of whoever you provide these funds for, the nature of these federal funds and the known unknowns that we're facing. We have a lot of supply chain issues. We have a lot of inflation issues. So project costs are highly indeterminate at this phase. So any language flexibility that you could provide to allow projects that can't be completed to shift to other projects that are eligible, to make sure that we can expend every dollar that is allocated. Going back to our experience with the ARPA money several years ago, it was very difficult to spend that last penny, and we don't want to leave any penny unspent. We will, depending on whoever has allocated this, we would urge resources for compliance oversight and program management, as well as to consider, as we're allocating other funds that may be available, that we don't double allocate to some projects and under allocate to others, because the DFA has aligned our requests to make sure that we're not asking for the same project in bonds and the same projects in cash and the same projects in ARPA funds. So we have provided that information to the elbow so that we avoid that, because we don't need the funding twice, and we don't need to leave off an opportunity we could otherwise support. Included in the packet is the details from the reporting and compliance for these categories and what they can be expended on, as well as the actual excerpt from that guidance document. It's a little hard to see the highlights, but specifically on that spreadsheet at the end, you'll see a dot next to every project, and that's tied directly to a reporting category. So each one of these is one for one. If it's a reporting category, it's listed by that, so that there's no confusion whether or not these are eligible projects. And with that, if there are any questions or.
I do have a question. When we're looking at all this, and I'm assuming what you said about elbow, the overlap of what the universities may be asking for and what you've included in here can be separated out.
There are some additional requests, I believe, that the universities and colleges have that are beyond capital requests. We did receive, I think, the same information that the universities and colleges are presenting to you, but I've not seen the final documents that they've submitted. But we did, I think, talk to each of the universities and get input from them as far as the projects. Some of them, I believe, there might be some difference of opinion on whether something's eligible or not. We took a very conservative approach and said, if it's not clearly within the four corners of this eligibility, we did not bring it forward for a recommendation, because expending this kind of money and this kind of time is going to be challenging enough.
And on your 44,500,000 for state or for wildlife fisheries, is all that for state parks, or does it include other facilities of the agency?
The infrastructure component would include state lakes and parks for the water sewer. As you know, many of our state lakes also have RV camps and water and sewer of their own. One of the challenges for the park system is we don't have a great gauge of exactly what condition all of those infrastructure items are in. So one of the first things we would suggest doing is to get the engineers on board and actually camera the lines, check what we've got, inventory it, while we're working on expending funds on projects that are of known scope to develop the scope of the remaining projects. There's a lot out there in terms of infrastructure. A lot of it doesn't get discussed because they don't get a lot of funds for it. They don't request a lot of funds for it. So there's a learning curve on some of these to find out exactly what are the priority water and sewer lines to be addressed. And we think that first an inventory and mapping of some of these campuses that they frankly don't necessarily know the age of every line out there.
Committee members, questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of wanted to give y'all a little bit of history about the state health plan. Glenn's going to pass out these sheets, but we kind of, it's a lot of information. So to just try to break it down into two phases, from calendar year 2010 through 2015, the focus was really on reducing costs as much as we could. We recontracted with all of our vendors and dropped our administrative costs from about 55 million down to about 35 million. We modified the way we were reimbursing providers with substantial savings. And we also introduced a national network, which expanded coverage for all of the state employees at a very substantial reduced cost. So if you can kind of see the very first item that we have on here, if we look from the total gain and the loss, it's kind of at the middle of the page. In 2010, we had a loss of about 29 million. When we take the premiums that we collected and we subtract the expenses that we had. So from 2010 through 2015, our reserve amount went from about 139 million up to about 274 million. So that was the focus in that first phase. And so you can kind of tell from the second phase, from calendar year 2016 through 2020, the plan started seeing losses. We had a 20 million loss in 16, 25 million in 17, 40 million in 2018. So the board at the time made the decision, since we had such a large capacity of money, our expenses were exceeding what we were collecting in premiums, but the board made the decision to use the reserve money instead of asking for a rate increase. So we went for many years without having any rate increases at all. So you can kind of tell the losses that we are showing, the 20 million, 25, 40, and the 44 million, the difference in that, the premiums did not go up, but we just pulled money from the reserves to kind of subsidize what we should have been collecting in premiums. So kind of now we're at the point for now at 21, we're down to about $80 million. So the board has a standing funding objective to have in reserves about half a month's premium. I think that's something they're considering, maybe increasing that. That would only be about $50 million. So We have used, at this point, we found it's about $53 million that have been for COVID. So we did have a 3% rate increase in 19. We had a 3% rate increase in 2020. That's still not quite enough to cover what our expenses would be. The main driving factor in our expenses going up are pharmacy costs. They have just increased just tremendously. And there's little ways to be able to control. We have new drugs coming out on the market that are $500 million a year for patients that are maintenance medications. On the backside of this page, one question that we're asked a lot is, how do we compare to other states? We do hear that our insurance is too expensive. And so this is from a presentation that we did a couple of months ago. But you can see here at the bottom, you can see where Mississippi is and what the total cost for operating the plan. These are 2020 numbers. And so for a single coverage, it's $418 a month. You can see what the other states are. So we're really at the bottom of that. Virginia has $779 a month. South Carolina is $500 a month. Florida's $763 a month. And so we're really, when you compare us to all the southern states, the plan's really the lowest cost when we looked at comparison of the benefits for others. So then we compared what the employees portion is. And so the average for the southern states, the employee pays for single coverage $92. We're $52 less than that. If you look at the state's contribution, with the exception of Arkansas, they contribute $338 for single coverage. The state in 2020 was contributing $378. That kind of varies. The next column just shows the proportionate rate of what the state pays for single coverage. The state's contributing about 90% for single coverage. So that's not really where the complaints come from. We get more complaints about what the family cost is. And so if you look at this and you kind of go to the last column, Mississippi contributes about 34% of what the family's cost would be. And if you look at all the other states, that varies between paying anywhere from 75% up to 89% for various states. And so I'm sure y'all get questions about that as well. Why is it so expensive for family coverage in the state? And that's really a policy decision on how much the state wants to contribute to family coverage.
Committee questions? Senator DeBar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there going to be a rate increase next year?
Yes, sir. The board did vote for a 6% rate
A
increase.
6% increase?
Yes, sir.
Is that that's for family and for single persons across?
That's the total. Mhm.
So, okay. I see ours total costs, our premium costs and we've talked about this before, so I may be asking you questions redundantly, but ours is the lowest cost, but does that necessarily mean it's the best coverage? Our deductibles lower? Is our coverage just as good as other states that have a higher cost?
It has been, and when we do this comparison, like other states may cover 5 or 6 different plans. We pick the plan that's most closely aligned with ours to do this comparison with. And we have been pretty much in line. For next year, we did have a rate increase of a premium increase for the deductible increase went up $300. So next year we will have a $1,500 deductible, and that's starting to put us a little bit higher than what the Southern average would be.
Okay. And on the family plan, the state only covers 34%. And you said that's a policy decision. Is that a policy decision of the legislature?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, we're roughly 30% lower in coverage than the states, at least some other states like Georgia and Kentucky. Alabama is 81%. They cover the employee share. How do they pay for that? With money so, tight as it is generally, how do they cover? What do they do differently than we do in Mississippi?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to how they fund that other than, I do know like in Alabama, they allow $800 to $900 per employee. And that kind of goes back out to the agencies and then comes back. So for every employee that's covered, they automatically contribute $800 or $900.
Okay, so the state subsidizes $800 to $900 per
Yes,
employee.
sir. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Okay, just to be clear, I think Ms. Welch said in the beginning, you've identified about $50 million that we could move in from ARPA funds into the retention fund. Is that the most we can move? Because I think we certainly want to fund that as highly as we can with federal dollars instead of state dollars if possible.
Chairman, we're looking every day to find any expenses that we possibly can in order to pay for as far as the health insurance plan is concerned. So as Cindy and I were talking on the way over here, sometimes it's hard to tell, is this an actual COVID expense? Is somebody got an illness that is not COVID related? Sometimes it was both. So we're going to work with with our pharmacy benefit person as well as our third party to try to find as everything we possibly can that was a COVID related expense.
But
So
the
this
minimum,
is- right now we're up to 53. So hopefully this number will go higher.
all right, do you know when you'll have a final number or is it just continue on forever?
So Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna be looking every day.
All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is the Mississippi Development Authority. I believe Interim Director Hip is here along with Jamie Miller. Give us just a minute to get the handouts out.
Well, howdy. I'm Laura Hip, Interim Executive Director of the Mississippi Development Authority. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us. I'm going to be quick. Hopefully, we have a, of course, quick overview of all the manna from DC headed our way in Mississippi. Wanted to cover two quick things. Through the Economic Development Administration, there were some non-competitive grants the MDA has applied for, one in the area of tourism and statewide planning. We've received word that we got the statewide planning grant. We're still waiting to hear about the tourism grant. But to let y'all know what we plan on doing, of course, since these are COVID related grants for tourism, we focused on outdoor amenities and for improvements. Right now we're looking at, our proposal was to spend 1.5 million in upgrading our welcome centers. Of course, they were closed for a time last year. And then we made some upgrades with the nice fish tank walls and everything. I think we still need some improvements at our welcome centers. We also need to look at ways we can kind of help with our staffing challenges there and, the long-term viability of our welcome centers. We get about 5 million people that pass through welcome centers each year. Those are maintained both by Visit and MDOT. 1.5 million at our 13 welcome centers actually come inside and make contact with staff in some way, maybe pick up some brochures. There are some things other states that do that we'd like to look at, like you could set up kiosk outside for those who may not go in. You could have highlights from around Mississippi, maybe allow them to build their itinerary, email it to themselves. Some really interactive, more modern ways of reaching the tourist as they drive through Mississippi. So those are some things we're looking at. Also, for the state parks, we advertise our state parks in our tourism marketing now. But as y'all know, there is maintenance needs. what we'd like to look at is a pilot program for how we can really target some of our more popular state parks. A lot of that also depends on the cost of the improvements, but I'll take Grenada Lake for an example. You know, it's the top crappie fishing lake in the country. There has really cute cabins, which I think every fisherman would describe them that way, on the campus. But inside, it needs new paint. It needs some appliances from this century. There's some amenities you can do that. There's some ways you can tie those parks into the local community. Maybe having local artists have, you know, paintings in the cabin, tie them, drive them into town to a local art gallery, into restaurants. And I think there's some marketing opportunities we can do there in our parks. And we could test it out at one of our more popular parks and try to drive traffic into town as well. We also were looking to spend some of that money on maintaining our trail markers. We like to say we have the largest outdoor museum in the country. We have a blues trail markers. We have country music trail markers. We have your freedom trail markers. We have literary markers. We have all the markers you can need. Those, of course, need maintenance constantly. There's also ways we can look at upgrading how we communicate what the story those markers are telling to an audience. One thing we are testing right now on the Blues Trail is creating augmented reality. You could, when you go to the marker, either through a QR code or a GPS location, you could maybe get a video. It tells you the story of B.B. King, has people talking about B.B. King like 5 minutes. You know, those are kind of some new ways of using technology. We could even start to see how many people are going to the markers. So that's kind of some things we're looking at there through that EDA grant when we hopefully get word soon that we get it. Also, there's a statewide planning grant. We got $1 million from EDA for that. We are working with the research universities on our entrepreneurship assets and developing a strategy of how we integrate our research assets with our economic development efforts. You know, we have Nissan and Toyota kind of helped create CAVs and CME. We have, you know, an amazing facility at USM and I'm not just saying that for you, but at the Polymer Institute. How can we really incorporate what our universities are doing and communicate that to our prospects and how that can be useful and give us an advantage in economic development recruiting? And so that grant will pay for some statewide planning on that, some strategy there. So for any ARPA money that y'all have that you feel like giving to us, first, we support, you know, the work done by Accelerate. We are working closely with Accelerate on recruitment and workforce development needs. So at whatever level you choose to aid their workforce development efforts, you know, we see a lot of demand and careers are changing. EV technology, you know, Nissan just announced this weekend, they're really pushing into, you know, the battery market, even more electronic vehicles. That's a trend that's coming. Somewhere we need to get our workforce ready to participate there. Cybersecurity, of course, Mississippi State has a strong cybersecurity program. Keesler is a strong cybersecurity program. We need to, that's a burgeoning industry, of course, with all the hacking. We also would like to look at, for us, quality of place, both for tourism and economic development. Revitalizing our downtowns is important. It will help with hopefully retaining our young professionals and attracting more people to Mississippi. You know, the pandemic has changed living patterns somewhat. People are desiring living in smaller towns. I think we have a great advertisement for that in Hometown. We can really sell, you know, come make a difference in a small town, but we need help improving many of our downtown areas. I think y'all know that. We can, you know, MDA is familiar with administering grant programs to our communities. We'd love to design a program to help revitalize many of our downtowns in Mississippi for that purpose. And then, of course, in tourism, we also, the program y'all created last year under the CARES Act that went to the local convention and visitors bureaus for marketing purposes. It was a successful program. I think paired with what we've done at Visit Mississippi, tourism spending for September, according to the U.S. Travel Association, from 2021 compared to 2019, travel spending in Mississippi was up 24%. That's the highest percentage in the country this year. That shows that spending money in marketing is working on getting travelers here. We would like for our locals to get some of those grants like they got last year, so they can help sell our communities and get people to your towns as well. And Visit will support that in any way. We've been working very well together with our local communities on messaging and sharing our markets of where we target. And so that I think that would be another great step for that. And that's really all we need. Thanks. Short list. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any question? Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here this morning. On the tourism piece, the what you just alluded to, that the money that was spent, I think at the front end of COVID, wasn't it $13 million that was spent in doing the marketing and advertising?
Mhm.
And when the other states fell off, we fell off much less
Yes,
as
that's
far
right.
as a drop.
That's
I-
correct.
I believe a couple of weeks
were-
ago, the senator from Louisiana commented on that, and they're throwing a bunch of money into that. That specific ask, isn't it a $52 million ask to be spent
Yes,
over?
that
Could you
is,
elaborate on that a little bit, the meat of that ask?
well, it'd be $52 million. And what it would be is a grant program. We would model it exactly like the program y'all created the last time. They would have to create a marketing plan, submit it. We would review that marketing plan and then distribute the money in the exact same way. And then, we work with those local destination marketing organizations to, at Visit Mississippi to, on the cities they target, on offering to offset some of their costs in certain types of advertising. And we would continue to do that. And that helps that dollar stretch farther.
There's another ask of $100 million, which is another program. Could you elaborate on that one a little bit?
Well, I know the Tourism Association has asked for that.
Okay,
I know that for our quality of place, I know Governor Reeves envisions about $50 million for downtown revitalization.
Mhm.
I think that is maybe similar to what they're asking. I don't know if it's exactly the same as some of what they want, but it is amenity building and improvements there.
it would be a grant application as
A
well.
grant
the way it would
application,
work.
just like our small municipal grant program that we have at MDA.
And it'll speak to the revitalization of a lot of our smaller communities.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
our downtown areas.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Good to see you. I'm sorry. Senator Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I look at this statewide planning grant for the universities, where you are cataloging for entrepreneurship assets assessed, could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
MDA over the past year has began working a little more closely with the research consortium, which is JSU, USM, Ole Miss, and State, and working with their tech transfer offices and learning how we can commercialize what's on campus. A lot of those successful states we like to look at, their universities are doing a good job of getting the technology and the research on campus to market. And that helps create jobs for those fresh graduates, and they stay. That's kind of where we see that going.
Okay, that's great. And that's exciting because that was one of the things was actually going to visit with you and discuss. So we're looking at $1 million for that. Also, I saw over in the tourism, there was other dollars. Would there be any opportunities here to expand the opportunity for the universities to dip into those funds as well, crossing over, or are you definitely siloing these dollars for each category?
For the tourism money or
Either
For
one
each-
of them. If we were, and I'll give them a little, maybe a better one. You talked about the parks.
Mhm.
We have been given, almost every department has discussed parks with us. Are we making sure we're not going back and funding the same request? Is that going to go through elbow? I think that we mentioned, DFA mentioned that earlier when they spoke. Will these all go through elbow to make sure we're not double?
Oh, this is a direct grant from the Economic Development Administration. Of course, we would work with the Parks Department
Okay.
on their needs, with this grant.
Yeah, I'm all
Or-
about
yeah.
our parks getting help.
Yeah,
Very much so, but one talked about infrastructure from sewer and water. I think you spoke more a little bit about the upgrading of the facilities themselves. And I think we all know that some of those just probably need to be mowed down and start all over again. And so as we go through that process, is someone making that decision? I just would hate to see us put dollars in a refrigerator and something that the roof is caving in on.
well, yes, I think we would work together with DFA and the Parks Department as they assess those needs.
Okay.
I think it's important we find a way to, like I was mentioning, integrate our local towns and their nearby parks and really drive some of those visitors into town when they may get tired of the campfire and shop a little.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Next, we have on the agenda, the Department of Human Services. Bob Anderson, welcome. We look forward to your presentation. If you will, give us a few minutes to pass out any. Are there any handouts?
Morning. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I didn't hear.
Do we have any? Yes.
Oh,
If you'll
yeah.
give us a moment to hand out, pass the handouts out.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, we look
Thank-
forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning on behalf of MDHS. We have just one request regarding a legacy system replacement project. But as you'll see, it's a fairly large request. Now, the reason we are requesting funding for this project is simply because our legacy systems are just obsolete. We invited some senators and representatives over last month to look at a demo of those systems. And if you had a chance to see them, I think I don't have to explain anymore about how obsolete they are. They're 35 plus years old. And the funding we're requesting would modernize all of the information systems at MDHS in order to ensure both program integrity, support to our clients, and impact the day-to-day efficiency of the agency as a whole. Many of those systems were built in the 80s and 90s. They're written in COBOL, which is a command line computer language that's really not even, excuse me, not even taught very much in the schools anymore. So they have outlived their usefulness. And we dedicate 50 or 60, I guess it is, employees to maintaining those systems. That's all they do is keep them up and running, because something seems to break down almost every week, sometimes daily. With the money that the $5 million that the legislature appropriated us during this current fiscal year, we retained Barry Dunn, which is an IT consulting firm that does a lot of evaluation and assessment. And they are evaluating and assessing and writing a recommendation report for us about the various cost alternatives for us to replace all of these systems. And when I say all of these systems, if you've ever seen this map, you can see how this is a map of our legacy systems. And they are about as disparate as they could be. These are our eligibility systems up here. This is the child support system. This is the TANF system. Some of our community services in a separate little system over here. None of these individual legacy systems can talk to each other. There's no interoperability at all. And that is what causes so much inefficiency. An employee that creates and opens an eligibility application in the Maverick system has to start all over again to create an application in the child support system. And so we don't have any interoperability whatsoever. Replacing these systems obviously would enhance the efficiency and the effectiveness of services that we provide to, depending on the program, 350,000 people we provide SNAP benefits to. About 320,000 children are involved in our child support program. We have well over 30,000 children who are in the child care subsidy program. All of those would be more efficient, would be more effective, would reduce costs and save the taxpayers money if we had a modern interoperable system to run all of our programs together. It would improve the overall usability and functionality of our data systems and develop what we've asked Barry Dunn to tell us in their recommendation is, what are the steps we need to take in order to develop interoperable systems that can talk to each other so that when a single mom comes in, we can sit down with her in a single setting, take a single application for all of the benefits for which she and her family may be eligible, or single dad as the case may be, or a family that comes in and is requesting assistance. Now, all of the systems that are impacted by this legacy replacement project would be our supplemental nutrition assistance program, the child support enforcement program, the early childhood care and development, which is our child care program, temporary assistance to needy families, and then several others such as our low income home energy assistance program or the LIHEAP program, our aging and adult services programs. All of those would all be enhanced by a replacement of all of these old legacy systems. Now, here's the rub. The cost of this replacement project is our best estimates, and I have with me Mark Allen. He's the director of our Division of Management Information Systems. He and his staff have done some preliminary estimates, and Barry Dunn tells us they agree that these estimates are pretty accurate. The total cost for this entire project would be $150 million. And you see the cost, the primary cost of that obviously is designing, developing, and implementing the new legacy system. That's always the biggest cost. There are associated other costs in terms of space that we would make available to a vendor, hardware costs, knowledge services costs, software, supplies. All of it essentially adds up to $150 million, $25,834. Now, does this project qualify for ARPA funding? We have researched that issue, and under the interim final rule that was issued by the Department of Treasury, we believe this kind of project is plainly within the language of the interim final rule, which says state and local and tribal governments may use these funds to improve efficacy of programs addressing negative economic impacts, including through the use of data analysis, targeted consumer outreach, improvements to data or technology infrastructure. That's exactly what we're talking about, and impact evaluations. The problem is that these ARPA funds, as all of you know, have a limited lifespan, so to speak. They have a deadline for obligation, and they have a deadline for liquidation. I believe the latest date is about 2025 for liquidation. And I would love to stand here and say we would welcome, and we do welcome, ARPA funding for this entire project. But in the real world, there's no way we could accomplish this project on the timeline for those ARPA funds, just by virtue of the fact that we have to put out an RFP, which requires us to go through the ITS process. That in itself I'm told it's probably at least a year, maybe a year and a half process, just getting the RFP awarded before we begin the work. And I tell you, it pains me to stand here and say, I'm eligible as an agency, we're eligible for these ARPA funds, but what we're going to ask the legislature to do is award those ARPA funds to other agencies who can expend them on the timeline. And we still need this project. Now, if we go at it and we can't match these ARPA funds either. And the $150 million for ARPA funds would be the whole project. We've inquired of all of our federal partners, and ARPA funds cannot be used to draw down any federal matching funds. We ask FNS, we ask HHS that direct question. They said, no, you cannot use federal funds. And it makes sense. You can't use federal funds to match other federal funds. So if we go at this and we ask the legislature, and we are asking you to fund this as a capital expense project, the cost to the state becomes $54,294,138 because each of the primary participating programs have a federal match. FNS is the SNAP program. TANF is obviously is the temporary assistance to needy families. OCSE is the Child Support Enforcement, the Office of Child Support Enforcement. And then the Child Care Development Fund share. Those four federal entities would fund for all, for round figures, essentially $100 million of this project. And we're asking the legislature, and I know I'm kind of early, but I wanted to go ahead and explain to this committee, based on your invitation to us, why we're just not optimistic. I mean, I think it would require the legislature to give us some kind of a legislative sprint through the ITS process to even get an RFP out there by January, February of next year. And then it would honestly could take the rest of next year to award the contract. And realistically, I just don't see that we could complete this. And as executive director, let me tell you, this is the top priority for me, for our agency, because it affects our retention of employees, it affects our training of employees, and most importantly, it has the biggest drag on the service that we provide to the clients who depend on us. We can't even take a full application in less than a couple of hours or more because of the way these systems work. And it troubles me, the complaints I hear, the complaints you hear, the complaints that are legitimate about how slow our systems work, how often they break down, and how much trouble it is just to operate them across the state. And so we need to modernize these old systems. But in reality, I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that this request be in the form of a capital expense request. And I do have a memo. I apologize, I haven't gotten it to this committee. I was out of town last week, but I will get that memo to this committee, and also it's prepared for the appropriation chairs describing this same information and asking that this be funded as a general fund capital expense project for us. Happy to answer any questions in the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Of course, capital expense would go through the chairman of
Yep.
the full appropriations. But what you're suggesting is we fund other agencies with ARPA dollars that we can, to the point that we would free up $54 million for capital expenditure, which can be matched to pay for the $154 million system.
Mr. Chairman, you followed me exactly. That is exactly what we're asking. We're stepping out of line for the ARPA money and saying, fund all the other agencies that have requests with that ARPA money. And then out of general funds that they would otherwise be using, fund this $54 million state share for us.
Earlier in the beginning of your presentation, you said because of the COBOL system, you have 50 or 60 employees that deal with that every day. Is that full-time only working on the system, or do they have other jobs also?
Well, they have other jobs, but most of their job is maintaining these systems. Let me ask Mr.
Well, let me
Alan.
add to that before you ask, how many pins could we remove from your role that has having to deal with this whole system? How many jobs can we eliminate?
Give me just a moment. Okay. Two parts to that, Mr. Chairman. One, I didn't even mention, we also have another 30, 35 contract employees who are involved in that same work. We could eliminate those 30 to 35 contract employees, and those are knowledge services contracts, and we pay them about $120 an hour. We could eliminate all 30, 35 of those. I'm told that the 60 pins, they have other duties. They're working on, developing software programs for us, but there's also going to be a maintenance and operations staff required even with a new system. If we eliminate those 30 to 35 contract employees, we probably wouldn't eliminate any significant number of state pins, maybe, 4 or 5.
Williams?
Do you know how much savings it would be? I mean, I think that's what we're asking. If we implement this new system, what's the dollar savings per year?
Well, I could say in conservatively, I would say we're going to save in employee training. It takes us about a year to train an employee. We have about 800 employees who are involved in the eligibility function in some fashion. We could truncate that training, we expect, down to about a month or less. And that would translate easily to $15, $20 million a year in training costs that we would save with a new system. Let me ask Mr.
Yes,
Allen just a minute. $15 to $20 million a year is what we estimate we would save by updating these systems.
Okay, could you go back to the slide that breaks down the 150 million? I had a few questions on it, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
The design and development, that implies this is like a from scratch system. Are there neighboring states that have something we could model?
Well, the design, that's just the overall title. The design may involve pulling a system from another state and adapting it to our needs.
Yes,
They're not going to start from scratch.
Okay,
None of
okay.
these projects start completely.
I didn't think it did. You got hardware costs of 410. I'm sure I'm looking at this wrong. In the 126, I'm sure that would include, because you got thousands of new computers to buy and hardware they would buy. Would that be that $126 million or?
Well, this project would not require us to buy a lot of new hardware because a lot of the new system would be housed in the cloud and would operate in the cloud. So the build is really adapting it to the cloud storage systems that we get through ITS.
Yes, sir.
And using we could probably use our same terminal. What do you think? We have what are called WISE terminals. You look at them, they look like a computer. The problem is they don't have a brain, basically. They are tied to the main system in the cloud, and we would continue to do that. So we don't think there's a whole lot of hardware costs associated with this, but it's just designing all of those new systems,
Yes, sir.
plugging them into the cloud storage system that ITS maintains. And possibly buying, this may involve also buying more cloud storage
Sure.
capacity. I mean, a significant amount of additional cloud storage space.
And I assume there is a degree of collaboration with ITS or somebody on a state level that as we have other agencies that move this direction, we all are trying to have some cohesiveness as we go forward. Is that, am I right in that assumption? A lot of places are siloed and they've got their own systems and things. As we go forward, best practices hopefully is in the conversation.
Yes, sir. Whatever we develop, particularly if we develop it with federal dollars involved,
Yes, sir.
we're obliged to share it with every other state agency, every other state. If they want to come and use it, then we're obliged to share what we built with them. So.
Okay. Thank you. Would it be possible to get the slides we didn't get that had the dollars on it, or an email copy or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Galarno can get those to you. Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Butler. Senator Butler, would you get a microphone, please? Thank you.
One of the things I need you to help me understand, and that is that I understand the system here is antiquated.
Yes, sir.
How long will it take you to update your system in reference to communication of the various groups?
That will be all part of the same project. They will be built to be communicating with each other. Now, the whole project, we estimate, that's why I think ARPA is beyond our reach. We estimate this project to be no shorter than a 5 to 6 year project from start to finish, from RFP to awarding a contract to getting the contractor in place and doing all of this work. We anticipate it would be 5 to 6 years. But yes, but then all of those systems, the plan is for all of those systems then to talk to each other, to be interoperable, to be able to communicate with each other, which they don't do right now.
Okay, now, let me help me to understand this. So you're saying that one of the problems that you're having right now is that you're not able to carry out the functions or meet the needs of some of your some of the individuals that you need to meet the needs of, because one group is not aware of how they could refer them to another group and work the system, whereas that they could be serviced more more efficiently.
Yes, sir. Let me put it this way. We don't have a single application for SNAP, TANF, child support, childcare. And so what we have is the extra cost is we have to take single applications for each of those programs through each of these systems. We take a SNAP application. Then if we want to take a TANF application, we have to start all over again and take a TANF application. If we want to take a child care application, then we have to start the process all over again and take a child care application. None of these where we store the data doesn't talk to each other. And so the eligibility worker has to essentially multiply their work 3-4 times to address a family. Let's say a family comes in and they're eligible for TANF, for SNAP, for child care, for child support. That right now, that's 4 application settings, basically. That's requiring that family to spend 4 sessions, if you will, with us. And it's difficult for them to give us that time. And it's burdensome on them to have to show up 4 times in order to address all 4 of the benefits they're entitled to.
So under your new system, if I was to come in and I have a need, could you, under the new system, would you be able to have a discussion with me? And after the questionnaire has been covered, will you be able to determine what different groups I qualify for, and then be able to assign a person to work with me to meet those needs?
Yes, sir. That's the one non-negotiable piece of this replacement project that I have mandated, that we assure that we can take all these applications into one and eliminate all of this duplicative work. I mean, we're spending a tremendous amount of man hours duplicating the work 2, 3, 4 times. And to me, if we're going to modernize the systems, if we don't make it into a single setting, a single application, we haven't really accomplished anything. So yes, my hope, my request, my demand of this vendor will be that these systems are able to talk to each other so that we can enter all of the data one time and make the single eligibility determination for all of the services that we can offer to a family.
And another thing too, I want to commend you on the job that you're doing. We can see that it's more efficient than it was before. And we want to help you to get to that level that you're trying to get to.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. You know, my goal has been, you know, when I first got there a year and a half ago, it was to clean up the mess. But my goal now is to move this agency toward excellence. And we have to have 21st century tools to do 21st century work for the families we serve. And that's why we're asking the legislature for this help so that we can move into the 21st century and serve these families. Thank you.
Thank you all. If you have any questions further, we're running behind. Would you mind just calling Mr. Anderson directly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Mississippi Public Utilities Staff Director, Sally Doty.
You better be quick. I'll help you catch up, Mr. Chairman, I believe. 'Cause
That would be a good thing.
mine will be brief. So Chairman Polk asked me to provide a overview of broadband funding sources. It seems that everything you read about funding coming down, all this federal money, it's broadband, broadband, broadband. So I wanted to let you know what is available as far as we can determine. So you all know that the legislature in 2020 allocated $75 million of CARES Act money for broadband development in Mississippi. It was required to be a matching grant, and that is what my office over at the Public Utility Staff, we oversaw that grant. It is completed. And we have 5,833 miles of fiber and over 16,000 new locations. And that was as of June 30th. And I know that 16,000 is probably more like 20,000 now, and probably even higher as people come onto those systems. So we've completed that, and we're glad to be a part of that. And that's really how our office became involved in broadband. You know, the Public Utilities Staff is separate from the Public Service Commission, but yet we work together and we provide them with technical support. Really, there is no regulatory authority over broadband. It's not, you know, it's not a monopoly. It's a competitive business out there. The one thing the Public Service Commission does is provides a certification to any broadband provider that receives federal money. So usually, you know, there's some strings attached if you get federal money. So you have to be an eligible telecommunications provider. And it's a checklist type certification. You know, you're registered to do business in Mississippi. Have you know, different items, and the PSC grants that certification. So that's really our interaction with these broadband providers. So you'll see that the next chunk of money that was available or is available is RDOF, and it is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. The RDOF auction was last year, I believe, around October, November of 2020. And I'm sure you all heard Mississippi did really well. We got $495 million. But it's more like the opportunity to have $495 million. That money is not paid out in one chunk. It will be over a 10-year period of time. And then there were some providers that bid on parts that have not proven to the FCC that they can actually come through with the type of service that they said they could. So they are in that process right now. It's called they've got to have their long form approved by the FCC. So that process is ongoing. So we really don't expect to see all of that money come into Mississippi. It might be reshuffled somewhat, but there's going to be some shuffling of that money again over a 10-year period. So it's got to be built out by year 8, which will be 2028. Next, there is the Capital Projects Fund under the American Rescue Plan. The Treasury guidelines came out on it on September the 20th of this year. And the state of Mississippi would be the applicant for this $162 million. It's a definable amount. The governor identifies and would delegate how that money is spent, can sub-grant it to cities or counties, can go to nonprofits or private entities. So it can go to co-ops, it could go to big internet service providers, small, it could go any number of ways. It is not a competitive grant program from the feds, but certainly could be set up as a competitive grant program here within the state level. All funds must be expended by December 31, 2026. Then there is the infrastructure bill that was passed November 15th. There is an immediate 100 million that is provided for broadband, and then unfortunately it's wait and see where Mississippi falls in with that. I believe that Mississippi will have a pretty big chunk of additional money because of our number of unserved locations in the state. So there's a minimum of 100 million to each state, and then grants are awarded for high cost funding, which means geographic remoteness, low population density, poverty, and unserved, which I think we're going to rank pretty high in that. Broadband maps are being put together right now. There was another federal act last year. We expect those broadband maps to be put together by middle of 2022. And at that time, then they will make the determination of where these unserved and underserved areas are and where the money will go. So I don't expect to really know how much money Mississippi will get until that time. But it also, that funding requires a 25% match from each subgrantee, and that will all flow through the NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. So it'll all be grants coming down from that agency. Y'all had some questions yesterday about IHL and community colleges and their request for broadband. I did a little bit of research on that yesterday, and all of the state institutions are provided broadband service under one state contract. So it comes to the campus, but then perhaps the campus has some issues with their network service within the campus. And so I think that is probably, without knowing for sure, but I think that's probably what those requests are for, is to have a more robust network within the campus. But as far as broadband coming in, there's a state contract that covers all of our institutions of higher learning and community colleges and their satellites. It goes to their satellite campuses as well. Senator Polk asked me if I could give a guess as to how much it would take to fully build out broadband in Mississippi. And I hazard to make, I don't think I can make that guess, but we've been throwing around, $2 or $3 billion is really what it would take to build out broadband. So although there is a lot of money that has been spent in the state and coming into the state, it's going to take a lot more money. It's just a very expensive endeavor to build out to such rural areas, and it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, and if you have any.
Thank you very much. Quickly, I'll ask the first question. If I do my math correctly, it looks like we're in line for about a total of $900 and some odd million from different grant sources. If that were matched by a dollar for dollar with the providing company, then we're looking at 1.8 billion,
Right.
which is close to your minimum 2 billion to broadband the whole state.
That's right.
Okay. Any questions?
Noted, I said between 2 and 3 billion though.
I saw 2. I did not see 3. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am, for being here today. these monies do not include the $1.8 billion of ARP money we're discussing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that could be of money that's above and beyond this.
Yes.
What of these monies have not been spent? Or what have been spent, maybe the easier question.
The only thing that has been spent is the CARES Act money that
Okay.
is up here. The RDOF money, I believe a very small amount has been released. But to a couple of providers. And again, that comes out over a 10-year period of
Yes, ma'am.
time. So it's a trickle, but that's the only money that's been spent.
And the $2 to $3 billion estimate is an estimate from here or an estimate total? I mean, we need to spend another 2 to 3 billion from where we stand
Total.
today.
Total.
Okay, so
Total.
we're on that path already.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've seen that we have between 280,000 to 350,000. You know, you see different things in
Yes, ma'am.
different unserved locations. And so we've extrapolated from those unserved locations, maybe $8,000 per location. That's how we get the big number.
As I've done research and I've tried to dig in this a little bit over the last few weeks, it seems to be coming up. Are we headed towards needing an office of broadband or someone in charge? Not a division. I'm not trying to say that, but you know, a lot of other states, I think, have this. Are we headed in that direction? Is that a need that's coming?
I think it is a need that we have. There's some entity needs to be, fully up to date on everything, all the opportunities that are out there. In fact, yesterday when I was listening in, some of the HBCUs had some requests for broadband, and I know there was some specific grant money for them that, quite frankly, earlier this year, I thought, gosh, I wonder if they've applied for that, but I didn't really feel like it was my place to make those calls, so I think we really do need some coordinated effort, whether it's run out of the governor's office or MDA or wherever, but I do think we need some specific office of broadband.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Mhm.
We appreciate it. Next on the agenda is Mississippi Department of Corrections. Commissioner Kane, if you would, come speak to us. Commissioner, if you would, just give us a few seconds to get the handouts distributed.
Well, thank you so much for having us today. I brought my helpers along because I don't know much about construction in pipe and wastewater. But our problems seem to be pipe and wastewater. Our numbers are humongous. I think we need more mercy than justice. Anyway, we prioritized the list, and our top, about $38 million on this list is the top 5 issues, and all of it has to do with wastewater. And I want to just mention this, and I hate to say it and hang it over our heads, but the Justice Department is knocking at the door. I've been through that before. I know what they're going to do, and they're going to get us on, especially the wastewater situation, because health code and so forth. Because at Parchment, they ran the pipes out through the field rather than going along the ditch. So the tractors in agriculture through the last 20, 30 years since it's been constructed have damaged the pipes and plows and so forth. Should have been run down the edge of the fields or through the ditches and along the side of the fields instead out in the middle. So that all has to be totally rebuilt. And we flip over to equipment, and it's our number 4 priority. And it again is wastewater, $150,000. So you see the list there, and I have with us Barney Poole and Carrie McDonald that can answer really any questions if I can't. So do you have any questions? The numbers are humongous. We need to fix it because the Justice Department is going to make us fix it, and we don't want that to happen. And so we're trying to avoid the consent decree at all costs. Our other issue with that is hiring people and so forth, and we struggle with that, but we're making progress, and we have hit some home runs there. But today we're to talk about this, not that. So any questions for me? If not, we'll get Carrie and Barney Poole here to help us out.
Any questions of the commissioner? I believe you've done quite a good job quickly.
Mercy. Help.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your time. That drought puts us back on schedule. Okay, two of our presenters are not here yet, so we'll take about a 5-minute break. Did you have to use the blue lights to get over here?
I'm sorry.
Did you have to use the blue lights to get over here?
Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today on the part of the Department of Public Safety. We do have a list of items that we've provided in our handout that we are looking at and we feel like would be appropriate funding requests for the money that the state's received, particularly as it pertains to public safety. And we've tried to rank them in the order that we felt like are most important to our agency. And I will say that some of these requests deal with paying additional funds to those that have been out there during the COVID pandemic, putting themselves at risk as they provided services to the state of Mississippi. And then others deal with the COVID death benefits for law enforcement and first responders that died in the line of duty. Those things are number one and number two on our list. And it's premium pay for ongoing work performed by eligible public safety workers. Other states have done this with their funds. Georgia, Florida have paid out premium pay to law enforcement officers and other first responders and other necessary personnel for the work that they did during the pandemic. We'd like to see the state of Mississippi follow suit. The estimated cost for that through the Department of Public Safety would be about $1.6 million. Number two is the death benefit claims due to COVID-19. I think as most of you are aware, there's a death benefit fund established in the state of Mississippi that pays in line of duty deaths benefits for those that die in the line of duty. In last year's federal legislative session, they expanded the scope of that to include from the time period of January 2020 through the end of 2021, death benefits for any first responders that died with COVID during the course of that time. They would also receive those death benefits. Key to that is what that legislation did is it took away the causation aspect so that those individuals didn't have to prove that it was work related if they died of COVID. It would be assumed that they had contacted COVID within the scope of their duties. Mississippi, if we were to take that approach, would take the same causation effect out. And we're estimating that there would be upwards to around 50 individuals and first responders and law enforcement that died with COVID. We did do a survey through the Sheriff's Association, police chiefs, and other state law enforcement agencies. And as of, I believe it was October 1st, there was about 30 COVID-related deaths of those individuals. We projected through the end of the year, it could get upwards to 50. That's why we put the $5 million mark in there. Moving on to our next list of things, and this is hiring sworn personnel above pre-pandemic levels. We would like to try to get our sworn trooper ranks up to 600. We feel like if we can have 2 patrol schools that would graduate 65 graduates plus some of the certified law enforcement schools that we plan on running, that for those officers that are previously certified, we feel like by the end of fiscal year 2023, we can get the number of troopers up to 600. They're allocated by statute to have 650 troopers. We haven't been up to 600 since about 2007. So we would like to get back to those numbers. Obviously, during the course of a pandemic, law enforcement plays a variety of roles. Our troopers worked across the state, helping protect and man the COVID vaccination stations as well as the testing stations. So growing the number of law enforcement, we feel like would be critical for any future situations that might occur, so that you could also have their attention applied not just to the roads that they protect, but the other pandemic stations that are created throughout the state. We also want to increase Capitol Police. I know that's been a discussion at the Capitol, and we've asked for some funds to grow the Capitol Police serving the Capitol District in order to improve what's going on within the city of Jackson and the Capitol area. Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, we'd like to hire 52 additional sworn officers. One of the things that we've been focusing on at NBN, in addition to enforcing narcotics level law, is also to work with a heavier focus on mental health specialization. If you look across the country, many departments are hiring officers that are also trained in mental health intervention. Oftentimes your drug-related issues also spill over into mental health. If you look at some of the numbers since COVID came about, alcohol and drug use is higher. And we feel like having officers trained in that aspect could also be important into the future and what those officers are doing at NBN. As we move into the rest of the items, many of these things, when I think of the money that's coming in as one-time money, it needs to be used on, in my mind, for Department of Public Safety asks, things that are transformational projects, things that would be a benefit for the state and DPS and public safety as the years go on. To that end, we have entered into a lease agreement with the Madison County Development Authority to rent a building up there. The first year is zero rent, then we pay, I think it's $15 a square foot after that. All our rent payments are applied to a future purchase price should we decide to purchase the building. The purchase price of the building is 80,000 square foot building. It's $4.5 million. The upgrades would be another roughly $3 to $4 million in getting the building enhanced. With that, we would have a centralized back office for driver services. We would have a call center, and we've already got plans to move those functions up there. This would just help facilitate and pay off that early on. We would also, in the interim, while we're hopeful to get a new headquarters building soon, we would also try to move our Homeland Security offices there, as well as our public safety and planning offices. Right now, we're paying rent in South Jackson for Homeland Security. We're paying rent in North Jackson for public safety and planning. By owning the building, we could do away with having to pay those rent payments and instead own the building. Number 6 is the purchase of hardware and software to improve cybersecurity. I know that's a specific function in the bill that was passed, that money could be allocated towards cybersecurity. We're trying to develop a cybersecurity team at Homeland Security. We will be recruiting a cybersecurity director for the state that will be based out of Homeland Security. But with that, we will need to upgrade our computers and equipment to help facilitate that. Number 7, we would like to see the updates to the Melota buildings. That's the Mississippi Law Enforcement Officers Training Academy in Pearl. I know a number of you had an opportunity to visit recently. Those buildings were built back in the, I think the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. They've pretty much run out their lifespan. They have group showers and things of that nature that when you look at living in a COVID world and trying to run a law enforcement officers training academy in a COVID world, you have to do things that separate the cadets so that if an outbreak occurs, it doesn't infect the entirety of the classes and then cancel the entire class, which happened last year when we had an outbreak at Melota. We had a couple of people get sick and we just had to shut down a whole class halfway through the process. So we feel like building a new dormitory that is built with pandemics and COVID in mind would be a good use of that money. Also development of a new multi-purpose center out there to host training events for law enforcement and the NRA events that we've had in the past, that's included as well. Number 8 is a state medical examiner's office in North Mississippi. As y'all know, we do have a facility in South Mississippi for the state medical examiner's office. We have a pathologist that operates out of that office servicing South Mississippi. Much of that building and complex was paid for with funds from Katrina. We feel like it would be appropriate to look at putting one in North Mississippi to serve the citizens of North Mississippi. Just so you know, when there's a murder or there's a death and it's in Corinth, the coroners have to transport those bodies down to Jackson, wait for the autopsy, come back, pick the body up, and then deliver it back to families. We feel like it would be much more expedient if those autopsies could be performed in the north part of the state so that the families get that closure done and quicker and a faster function, and then they can have the funeral and other aspects. So we've met with folks with the University of Mississippi. There's an old hospital in Oxford that we feel like would be a great location that could be retrofitted into a state morgue and lab where we could place a pathologist. The estimated cost on that was 3.3 million. We've put in here at number 9, another helicopter for the Mississippi Highway Patrol. When we got our first helicopter, it was intended that there would be a second one. Right now, the one helicopter we have has been down for regular maintenance. It's been about 4 or 5 weeks. I've talked to the commissioner in Tennessee. They have a fleet of 3 to 4 helicopters that they keep in rotation. I know Harrison County has a couple of helicopters. The state of Mississippi has one that it's utilizing for public safety. Oftentimes, these helicopters are called to assist local law enforcement that can't afford that, to assist with searches for children that might be lost, people that might be on the run. And so it really serves a function across the entire state. And we would like to get that second helicopter. Number 10, DUI enforcement, as I mentioned earlier. We've seen an increase in alcohol purchases. It's been well documented. And what we have is a situation where our old intoxilizers are becoming outdated, and it's time to upgrade those. And the estimated cost to upgrade to the new intoxilizers would be about 2.5 million. Also, breathalyzers that contain exit ports so that it's safer for the officers to handle the breathalyzers. In getting new breathalyzers would be about 300,000. Driver's license system is in need of an upgrade. We have a system that's been online, our software, if you will. And in order to support mobile ID, the estimated cost of the upgrade of that system is 6.7 million. That's something that's going to have to be paid regardless. But we also feel like as we're moving into mobile ID and trying to find ways that people can renew online and renew with their mobile devices so they don't have to physically come into driver service stations, is a way, again, to avoid the spread of COVID and allow people to do more functions from home. That estimated cost is 6.7 million. We've also asked for equipment at the state medical examiner's office, x-ray machines, vehicles for the death investigators, other equipment that's needed out there to help with facilitating the additional autopsies that are having to be performed. And then 13, incentive pay for recruiting forensic pathologists. And it's been an issue in Mississippi for years and years and years. We don't have enough. We've got 3 right now. We've got one that's probably about to leave in January who's accepting a job in Texas. So we'll be back down to 2 state pathologists. And in order to recruit them, we need some funds to go out nationwide and pay for their expenses to fly here, visit, and hopefully recruit at least 1 or 2 more pathologists to move to Mississippi to work at the ME's office. For an example, I met with one that we tried to recruit from West Virginia maybe a month ago, and I actually paid for his lunch while we're recruiting him to get here because it's that important to me that we try to add to the number of pathologists we have. And then lastly, information technology for the Capitol complex. We're wanting to install license plate readers and cameras at various locations throughout the Capitol District, again, to help with security around the Capitol. We feel like that would be a good use of the money since law enforcement can't be everywhere all the time. Having cameras and license plate readers would help keep track on folks moving in and out, particularly criminal elements that might be coming. So those are our 14 requests. It's a mere $75 million drop in the bucket. But I will emphasize that, as you all know, a core function of government is public safety, and we feel like that would be a vital and visionary use of the funds to help this state in the future and now. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, the commissioner? Question I have is on the first page, it looks as some of this might be recurring expenses.
It would be. Now, number 1 and number 2 would not be. That would be one-time expenses. But when you talk about adding the sworn personnel for Highway Patrol and NBN and Capitol Police, that would create a reoccurring expense. But what it would do is get us up to those levels that we were in 2007. And one of the things when I'm talking to folks and we look at our state, the reality is 5 years ago, we had about 280 homicides. This year, we'll be pushing 600. In 2007, we had 600 troopers. Now we average around 500. Often during the course of the year, we'll get down into 400, then we'll have a class, and we might get back over 500. When you look at narcotics, in 2007, we had 150 MBN agents. We had around 100 overdose deaths. Last year, we had about 300 overdose deaths. We're down to 88, 90 narcotics agents. I don't think Mississippi's a safer place than it was 15 years ago. This helps us get back to those levels, and then we have to look at reoccurring funds to keep us at those levels. But I think we've got to take some drastic measures to get back up to that level of public safety with personnel that we want to get to.
So if these are recurring expenses, we could probably figure out a way to cover them through 2026. And at that point, they would become a state.
Right. And part of the 7.3 million is the request for a trooper school. And with that comes the expense of equipping. And so a lot of those expenses for equipping new cars, the new things you have to purchase in order to get them up to 600 is included in that cost. And then eventually, yeah, it would be a burden borne by the state. And if we can only do it through 2026, that gets us there. And our goal would be to have by the end of fiscal year 2023 up to those levels. Kind of a booster shot, if you will.
Senator Butler?
He decided to put all this in there so that we'll do the budget.
I think he knows how to play the game. Any other questions? Senator Michel.
Thank you. Commissioner, prior to your taking over the head of Department of Public Safety, the County of Madison had offered to build a facility for the state at the northeast quadrant of the Canton Interchange and I-55. And I think they reneged on that. Have you had any new, what it's turned into now is the county was going to give a free facility, and now they're wanting to charge, I believe you said 4.2 million for this building at Canton. And that was the first question. The second question is, if the ARPA funds don't qualify to help with the acquisition of that, do you have a game plan to buy that building? Is there a time at which your lease expires and you have to act on that?
I believe that we have a 4-year lease agreement. The first year is rent free. And then each year after that, we're paying the $15 a square foot. Any of our funds that are applied towards the lease, we have a separate MOU that allows us to purchase that minus whatever we've paid in lease payments. So eventually we could possibly get it down to where there was a very minimal purchase price for it. And you know, that would be the goal. I will say we're at a critical point at DPS. I mean, we're busting at the seams in the building that we're in. We just don't have enough room, especially with the additions of CTED and Capitol Police and the back office personnel that we have to have at headquarters. So we've kind of made this decision to go forward with the Madison facility just out of bare necessity. If we've got to pay for it out of our budget, we'll try. But we also feel like long-term, this could be a driver service station. Backroom offices for driver services would be held up there in Madison. And we feel like that's a good location. We had hoped that it would be given to us free, but obviously I don't think an 80,000 square foot building Madison County wasn't willing to do. There was an AG's opinion that said that the counties could not give to the state free space. And so I think that was what happened in that situation in Canton, where the state kind of backed out of it, is when the AG's opinion said that they couldn't. That was under a previous administration. I'm not 100% sure that would be the case now, and I'm not even 100% sure what kind of law that was based on, other than more of a policy decision, it appears to me. But in any event, that led us to where we are with this. So I feel like it would be a strategic location to put one. I feel like that building can serve multi-purposes for now, and in the future, should the state decide to sell it, they don't need it. I think with the price that we're getting it for, which is roughly $50 a square foot, it could let go of it.
the plans when they were going to donate the building included a location for commercial driver's licenses as well. And that's a tremendous need we have. We have people graduating from driver's academies and schools, $70,000 jobs waiting for them, and they weren't able to get their licenses. And I know I've talked with you about that. Is there room at this facility to add a CDL where we can get our truck drivers licensed and get them on the road making money?
There's a very large parking lot that comes with it. And so there is room there that we could do some of those functions with the third-party tester program that was passed a couple of years ago. That's certainly helped some of the struggles that we've had on getting those CDL issues. But there is space there. And I will say that this is right off I-55. It's across from the Nissan plant. So it's very, again, strategically located in that area where there's a lot of commercial businesses and industrial.
Do you think you would need extra land to have room for a CDL training facility there?
I mean, if
Or
we wanted to
approval?
keep that there, yes, I do.
There is enough land now, or you need more, you think?
I think there's enough, but I mean, there is plenty of woods around there. So,
Yes.
I mean, if we could acquire additional space to spread it out, I think that would be better. I do feel when we have Homeland Security and Public Safety planning there, until we get a new headquarters built, space would be tight. But hopefully, once we get a new headquarters and Public Safety and Planning and Homeland are located at the new headquarters, that gives you all the space you need to be able to do the other functions.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Hopson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, we've talked about this before. One of the concerns you've had and you had when you inherited the job was the backlog of autopsy and examinations. And we've talked about and helped to try to fund some of these medical investigators in addition to the medical examiners. And I think you hired a medical examiner recently, correct? A new one. Is there any way to utilize the ARP funds to help with the backlog on the autopsies? Or is it just that we've, one, can you do it? And two, what could be done to help expedite taking care of that problem?
And we have started a plan to deal with that. We've been entering into contracts with pathologists from across the country. I've got a contract with a pathologist in Houston. We've got one with a pathologist in Arkansas, Tennessee, West Virginia. We do have autopsy reports that are pending all the way back to 2011. So what I've directed my staff to do is let's start sending out all these old autopsies that are that far backlogged to these contract pathologists. And we've entered into contracts and that could possibly be a use of the money. I'm no expert on it. Our new budget director has been reading it back and forth, Liza, and she could probably tell me better whether or not we could actually use the money for that. I think if there's a nexus to the COVID response, which for some of these autopsies there would be, I would think that we could utilize some of those funds to pay these contract pathologists to perform those autopsies.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Mississippi Veterans Affairs Board, Director Stacy Pickering.
Other senator.
Chairman, that's our third senator.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we've got a couple of handouts we're going to get to the committee members. Perfect. Go ahead and hand the others out, Melissa.
Good Lord.
Oh, and I believe everyone has a handout now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. With me today is Joe Himleben, Deputy Executive Director, Pam Thrash. She's our Chief of Operations for our 4 veterans homes, soon to be 5th when Tradition comes online, licensed administrator, registered nurse, and then Melissa Wade is our Chief of Staff, here to make sure we answer any questions that you as a committee may have. The large binder I handed out to you, I'm going to walk you through that page by page. I'm not going to read it to you. Just want to point out the highlights to the committee. And we have 4 specific things we want to discuss with you, but this is the most important thing as we come out of COVID and issuing one of our biggest needs is the relocation of the Jackson home. And we'll walk through the reasons why. We're asking for $19,680,883.20, not to be specific, but for discussion purposes, we'll round it up to 20 million, but that is the actual number from the architects, engineers, and Bureau of Buildings that it comes to relocate that building and build that facility in standards with the VA requirements. Coming out of COVID, we, like every other nursing home, we had numerous outbreaks, numerous deaths, numerous hospitalizations. We converted most of our chapels at one time or another were converted into intensive care units for our COVID patients as they recovered. By relocating, we can overcome some of the flaws. Right now, most of our homes are traditional nursing homes where you have 4 veterans, 4 residents sharing 2 rooms and a shared bathroom in between. So anytime one of them got the virus, you pretty well guaranteed all 4 eventually would. The VA several years ago, about 6 years ago, I believe, Pam, started the process where they have to have private rooms for dignity of care, not knowing that that standard is also going to prevent the spread of the virus. We watched our fellow nursing home, veterans homes across the country that were multi-storied with elevators moving air. It spread like wildfire in those facilities, but the homes that had private rooms saw very contained cases. And this would allow us to do and address that issue here. It's a 65-35 grant, 65% federally funded from the VA. We have already started the application process and have submitted that. Therefore, any monies from the time that was accepted this year can be recouped at the 65%, including our architect and engineering. So you'll see those numbers right there on that first page. If you go to the home location tab, we'll walk you through kind of where we are currently and where the proposed site location would be. The first page shows you the current veterans home here in Jackson. It's our oldest facility at 30+ years old. It's the white building at the top. It's located in West Jackson at the corner of 220 and Capitol Street. It was built there because it was supposed to be built adjacent to the VA Medical Center, which is relocated several years ago to Woodrow Wilson. The proposed site is in Rankin County off of Airport Road, adjacent to Whitfield. It's state-owned property. They have 30 acres that are there, so we will not have a cost of incurring land. It'll be right there across from Hudspeth and the State Crime Lab. There's already a red light in place there for ingress and entrance and egress there. You'll see the layout. We had the architects go ahead and give us a preliminary to make sure we could set up a 150-bed facility there at that location. Your next tab is crime. We requested the crime records from the city of Jackson for our immediate area, just a 4 to 6 block area around the home. And we came back during that 6-month period with kidnappings, rapes, domestic assaults, simple assaults, burglaries, auto theft, just to name the highlights. You'll see 5 bullet points in the middle of there is what has actually took place on our property that we actually had to call the police for ourselves, to include burglarizing of our employees' cars, our buses and vans. Just most recently, their catalytic converters were cut off undernight. Undoubtedly, that is now a new hot topic of stealing catalytic converters off of vehicles, melting them down for precious metals that are inside of it. It doesn't sound like a big ticket item, but you're looking at $7,000 out of our budget to replace the mufflers. But that day we had to cancel doctor's appointments for veterans that we couldn't transport to the hospital, the VA Medical Center, to their doctors because of that issue. So it is a health issue that we have to deal with, had to reschedule those. And we actually had a kidnap and rape victim dropped off at our front door. We have got 24-hour security guards. It's our only facility that has 2 security guards, so we can have one internal and external. And one of our biggest fears is the fact that we do have a fully operational pharmacy on site there at that facility. Our security guards are not armed before that question comes up. It's just an issue we can't afford to happen. We request the Jackson PD to provide us better security in the neighborhood. It'll happen for a day or 2, and then we're back to where we were. You'll see the fence built around our employees' parking lot. We actually close that gate chain and we lock it at night. It's a chain link fence. We haven't had any problems for the last 12 months, and the criminals have started cutting through the chain link fence to get to the cars to break our employees' windows and ransack their vehicles. So before this committee and this invitation, the next page is the future security fence around the entire facility. We do have cameras at that facility, and the catalytic converter thieves came over the fence from 220 and made their escape that way. So we need to fence in the entire facility except for our catfish pond there on site. And that basically, the yellow line that you see there is the property line around our home. The quote from Jeff Code Fencing is, it's going to cost us really about $750,000 to build a proper security fence that can protect our veterans and our staff. You've got the crime stats that follow next to read at your leisure. That's just 6 months of crime in the immediate 4 to 6 block area around our home. The next category is infrastructure of the facility. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's our oldest home. It's 100 and where we're located. The first pictures there is the VA Medical Center that is rotting down, that is in disrepair, no use. That is our neighbor. You'll notice also there is a dumping in the neighborhood, especially Lindbergh Road that comes from Capitol Street. You have to come past Couples Nightclub and Sports Bar Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That is a happening place, but you're asking 70 and 80-year-old wives to drive through that to go visit their husbands and family members. It is starting to impact families not wanting to put their loved one in this veterans home. They're choosing Oxford, Kosciuszko, and Collins over Jackson. You'll notice as you go through there, the trash that's dumped, it is an illegal dumping site on that road. It is a wooded section. Our staff spends untold hours monthly trying to clean that up. We have repeatedly asked the city of Jackson for their assistance to no avail on that front. You'll notice the water outage in February of 2021 during the ice storm last year. We were 29 days without water running a nursing home. Our nurses and maintenance staff were carrying 5-gallon buckets of water up and down the hallways to flush the toilets. Also, we have not received a water bill from the city of Jackson until a month ago. We received one this past week for $188 for our veterans home. To put that in perspective, I'm spending $1,500 a month at Collins, Kosciuszko, and Oxford. We're estimating there's a $12,000 liability just on our water bill that we can't get the city of Jackson to bill us for. You'll notice the volunteer fire department from South Hinds County provided us water during the outage initially, but then we did have to buy a 5,000-gallon water tank ourselves to transport our own water. So we had reliable sourcing so we can flush, we can cook, and we had the expense of that during that time period. The aging of the facility, we're all familiar with Yazoo clay in this part of the state, and you'll start taking a look at the cracks on the exterior of our D hall. It's our most effective building there on property. Exterior walls are cracking at every point, but also internally, we're starting to see the sheetrock come apart and cracks around our doors, as well as the fact that our door is no longer closed, which is a violation of the Department of Health guidelines and the federal VA guidelines. Those doors have to close for fire and smoke protection. And now we're having a problem getting those doors to even close without having a gap at the top. The biggest issue on the backside of that is D hall. The floor has actually started settling, and you'll have a picture there if you wonder what the green ball is. Instead of showing you a video, we just a couple of quick snapshots. We do have the video if you want to see it. We can put a ball down at the top of the hallway and it rolls all the way to the other end. We should have said to put a wheelchair there and taken the brakes off for you. That's what happens to our residents. They, some of them think it's fun. Others of us, it's pretty dangerous, but it will literally slope them all the way down. So the big ask there, it's a $72 million project, but we're only asking $20 million for the state to help build a new veterans home here in central Mississippi in the Jackson area. It's our second largest population of veterans. It's a 65-35 match, and you're looking at $14 million annual revenue for a 150-bed facility that'll be built here. Any questions on that project or our veterans home?
I have one. So you're saying take the $20 million in ARPA funds and match it with federal funds. It's my understanding that you're not able to match funds with federal dollars.
That's an issue. We've put a request in a little earlier today as well to clarify that issue.
Okay, thank you. Questions about the facility?
The other issue, if you got the smaller binder, there's two things in that binder for you, and then I'll hit the third in a moment. The first one is dealing with our nursing shortage. And I know you've heard from the Hospital Association, Mississippi Healthcare, and the Independent Nursing Home Association everyone's dealing with this issue with a nursing shortage. To show you on the back side of that picture exactly what we're dealing with at Mississippi VA, that's the dashboard that we look at on a daily or weekly basis. If you'll take a look at this chart here, it'll show you exactly how we look at our census, what our census was as of last week for every home. It has been growing back up. You can see the line chart, but the biggest issue are the two second and third to the bottom charts that are red and blue. It shows you our staffing by percentage. Blue is state employees. These are our employees that are working each of our homes. So the CNA is a certified nursing assistant. The VA requires us to hire certified nursing assistants. We can't hire somebody off the street and train them on the job. They have to already be certified before they come to work with us. Only 23% of the CNAs working in Collins are employees. The rest are temp staff. We're hiring temp staff agencies. Collins is our hardest market because we compete against two hospitals in Hattiesburg, hospital in Collins, hospital in McGee, hospital in Laurel, and every other nursing home in that market. It's a tough market on nursing staff down there. We work very closely with Pearl River Community College and Jones Community College to get CNAs in and out. But when you've got temp staffs that are charging 3 and 4 times what we can pay, it's hard to compete on that issue. Just to give you an idea, this year alone, we've already spent $18 million on temp staff for RNs, LPNs, and CNAs in our 4 homes. That was not budgeted for when we started the year. Those will be funds that we will be requesting somewhere north 5 to 7. We're still working those numbers out in projections, how we're going to look going into the rest of the year. So there'll be about $5 to $7 million differential there that we have not budgeted for this year that we're having to pay out. The last page in there is our construction projects that we do have. And again, you have the same issue with the 6535 on some of those, but the $2 million, there's about $8 million of construction projects that we're paying for out of our budget already over the next 10 years to renovate and modernize. Some of that is to mitigate COVID issues. To give you an example, our dining room was built with a large opening out into the hallway. Well, any openings and circulation of air now circulates the virus or potential future viruses. So closing those in, remodeling those issues, having to redo our day rooms, our quiet rooms, so that they're functional for our residents, allows them to spread out. We've already this year raised money from the from fundraisers to Friends of Mississippi Veterans to build outdoor pavilions to have that outdoor space for families and veterans to build. So we're already implementing a lot of those changes. But over the next 8 years, you're looking at about $10 million coming directly out of our budget for how we're projecting to repairs and renovations in those facilities. The other issue, Mr. Chairman, you called on this morning. If you'd like to discuss that issue, I'll be glad to also talk about homeless veterans.
Please do.
All right. Melissa, will you pass these out real quick? For everybody's on, Chairman called this morning, want to take a look at Mississippi's issues, what we're doing, and I can give you some good success story. According to the Intergovernmental Council for Homelessness, so that is the federal office that aggregates all the information from all the federal agencies, we have we're looking at 68 homeless veterans in the state of Mississippi. It's not the epidemic that we think. We're looking at about 1,100 is the total number of homeless in Mississippi. 6% are veterans. So you're looking at 68. The VA tracks all but about 4 or 5 of them, know where they are. They get them health care, they get them food, but for different and various reasons, try to get them the treatment, mental health issues they need. So for various reasons, they choose to be homeless or just can't function on that issue. If we are relocated, one potential opportunity, if we can relocate the Jackson home, Shelby County, Tennessee took an old nursing home, converted it into a homeless shelter and transitionary housing. Sometimes you will see higher numbers, and that's the reason the handout I just gave you for homeless. Sometimes some federal agencies will count incarcerated in their homeless number. And the way they define it is, well, they're not in a home. They're having to be cared for as wards of the state. No, they're really not homeless. But to do that, we have addressed the Humvee program with Department of Corrections. It's a partnership with the commissioner and our agency, and a great success story on that front. The flow chart on the back of that, or the pie chart, will show you 65% of those that have completed that program at Humvee. They come out trained with NCR certification, apprenticeship 1 and 2 levels, guaranteed jobs. 64% are gainfully employed. Only 5% return to prison that have completed this program in the last 2 years. It is a great success story. We've got partnerships with the private sector, Construction Education Foundation, private companies from Thrash Construction, Southern Pipe. I can go down the litany of the list who bought equipment to build out the training facility where we can teach them welding, carpentry, masonry, HVAC. They come out with a skill and a guaranteed job. Our last carpentry class of 8 incarcerated veterans, Thrash Construction offered all 8 of them a job day one before they ever took the first lesson. They had a guaranteed job when they came out of prison. That helps with the recidivism rate as well as the moral and character classes that are required during that training. About $500,000, and it would be a recurring issue to hire the appropriate staff that will work with businesses to help guarantee those jobs are out there. And that opportunity for them when they come out, but also to have a full-time coordinator there. Right now, we're taking that out of Hyde, out of our budget and Department of Corrections budget to the tune of about $150,000 per, but it's not staffed, and we're using other staff we're augmenting to go out there from our general counsel. Ms. Wade goes out there. We got 3 or 4 folks who just added responsibility to get this program up because we believe in it so much, and the results have proven themselves. We're simply mirroring this on what's happened in Massachusetts and Arizona, who've done very similar programs. That coupled with what we're doing with the Supreme Court, trying to improve our veterans courts. We have 3 in Mississippi. They're statutorily authorized, but they're not funded. And we're looking at what we can do to grow those. Hinds County is our next target audience to put a veterans court here to help give them that opportunity as well, to get them out of the correctional system so that if they fail to launch when they come out of the service, it gives them another opportunity to launch properly. So we're working very closely with Chief Justice Randolph and his staff, Mr. Snowden and Administrator of the Courts to expand our veterans courts in Mississippi. Because again, their success rate in Texas, Oklahoma, and elsewhere in the state US are exceptional. Whenever we can get those veterans pulled apart, get them recalibrated and realigned. Any questions I can give you on those issues?
So if I had to say, the homeless issue for veterans is maybe not as bad as we could assume from seeing the number of homeless in other states.
Correct. Yes, sir. Texas, Florida are some of our biggest populations. California, obviously, they do migrate. Most of the homeless population that are what we refer to as professional homeless, they do migrate with the weather. And we don't have that. They transient, they pass through Mississippi, but actual homeless in the state is a very small number and has gone down since 2003 significantly. That's when we were probably at our height.
And so should I look at buying the prisons a sausage stuffer to train some of those people?
If you need employees, there's a good opportunity. It's a steady pipeline. I can tell you VT Halter, Ingalls, US Marine have all told us everyone that comes through this program, they'll hire. They've made job offers to every single one of them coming out of this program. So if you want to put a sausage stuffer in, let us know.
We'll talk about it. Any questions? Senator Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time for presenting today. If a new home is built, what would the plans be for the existing home?
There's 2 or 3 things we can do with the existing home, and that of course be up to Bureau of Buildings and State. And we work very closely with Bureau of Buildings on this. 3 years ago, University Medical Center expressed interest in having it and convert it into a swing bed facility for indigent Mississippians and get them out of the hospital, but give them a place they can recoup and recover. One thing to understand, when we build a new home, the VA requires us to put all new beds, new facilities. We can't take anything with us. So it's going to be a ready-made facility. There's a private company that has discussed the possibility of doing a lease purchase from the state they've got their own issues they've got to work through, but looking at their market and what they can do on that arena. The other, as we mentioned, we could have a homeless veteran shelter like Shelby, Tennessee has done, but also use it for transitional housing for those veterans coming out of the Humvee program. So there's ways we could potentially look to use it, but we're having expensive cost of operating that at that point we would have to address. It will take us 3 to 4 years to build a new facility. By the time you get through the federal grant program and then go through construction and bid, it's a 20-month construction project.
The private company you're looking at, is there an estimated value that could be recouped if it was sold at this
That would
point?
be a Bureau of Buildings issue. I mean,
Okay.
technically, all real property, they actually own our facilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just to Desmate, former Senator Pickering, we appreciate you being here this morning. Just
Thank
to
you, Desmate.
expound on those questions. If the facility were sold, what would be the federal state match on where the money would be distributed?
Money would all go back to the state. The agreement we have with the federal VA is a 30-year operation. I think it's a 30-year window, 20-year window that we promise as a state to operate that facility. So we're well past that contract with the federal government. So now any assets or value out of that building will come back to the state of Mississippi.
Thank you.
I believe that does it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I believe that's our last presentation. We're almost finishing it on time. Appreciate everyone being here. Committee, we will be having hearings again next Monday and Tuesday. So please fix your calendar to be able to attend those. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.